We're surrounded by a world filled with crisis, and if we don't have a clear way to make decisions when those crises come face to face with us in our lives, the results could be disastrous. In this video, we'll explore 3 classic moral dilemmas, and if you can solve them, it means you're pretty much well equipped to handle any tough situation that comes along in your life. And if you can't, it means you have a lot of hard work to do to get there. Let's start with dilemma number 1, which you might think is easy to solve, but by the time we get to the 3rd dilemma, you might just find you were totally wrong. So it goes like this. You're standing near a train track which forks into 2 tracks. A train is coming down the main track, and suddenly you notice that on one side of the fork there's a person standing there, but on the other side of the fork there are 5 people on the track. The train is currently headed for the fork of the track with the 5 people on it, and you notice that the only way to stop it is by flipping a special switch to divert the train onto the other track. But of course, standing on that track is the one person we mentioned before. Okay, so what do you do? If you don't flip the switch, then you'll have let 5 people get run over by the train. But if you do flip the switch, you'll save the 5 people, but it will be your actions that will have led to the death of one person. Okay. At just about this point, most of us will be saying something like, oh, but we can just shout to the people to get them off the train, or somehow we can try our best to stop the train. Realistically, I admit it. In most similar situations, it might actually be feasible to do that, but we're taking this situation to be what's called ceteris paribus, meaning all else held constant. So we can't introduce any other options, and we don't have additional knowledge about the situation, such as how morally good these people are, how old they are, how young they are, or even if they are personally related to us or a loved one. How would you decide this? Did you say flip the switch? If so, you're in good company. Roughly 90% of respondents to surveys regarding this dilemma would do the same.
I'll most probably flip the switch.
So I guess we should just choose to save the 5 over the 1, you know?
It feels so bad, but I would switch to one person.
So far, it's pretty easy to solve this dilemma, right? I mean, you did the best you could in a bad situation, right? Well, let's see if you can solve it now when we modify the situation a bit in dilemma number 2. Okay, so now instead of a track that diverts into 2 forks, we now have just one straight track. This time, the train is running on the track, and again, you notice that 5 people are on that same track, and if you do nothing, those 5 people will again be run over. This time, however, you're on an overpass along with another person. This person is very massive. So massive, in fact, that if you push the person over the overpass and in front of the train, it will definitely stop the train, killing that person but saving the other 5. Alright, I know, literally no person is that massive that they can stop a train. But do whatever you like to make this situation a little bit more realistic. Maybe this person is in a big metal box that's very, very massive, and that would stop the train. Regardless, what would you do? Did you choose not to push the person over the overpass? If you did, you would again be with the majority of respondents to surveys on this.
I would choose to not murder somebody.
I probably want to push that person.
And by the way, surveys on these dilemmas have been done across culture, and researchers have found that time and time again, regardless of cultural background, we pretty much share the same responses. In some ways, we're biologically built that way. In fact, a recent study corroborates the long-held idea that the less directly we feel the consequences of our actions, the less likely we are to truly care about the consequences of those actions. Could this simple biological reality explain why you would flip the switch in dilemma 1 but not push the person over the overpass in dilemma 2? Or do you have a deeper logical reasoning here? Let me know in the comments. Okay, so maybe you said you would push this person over the overpass, or even if you wouldn't, here's the ultimate test of your moral reasoning. Let's get away from the train tracks a bit and take a visit to the hospital for dilemma 3. Here you're a doctor and there are 5 patients dying from organ failure, all from different organs. Let's say one is kidney failure, the other is heart failure, another is liver failure, another, let's say, needs emergency blood transfusion, and another has fatal lung damage. But then along comes someone into the hospital. You learn this person has no family or friends, and so nobody would miss them if they're gone. And what are the odds? They're also a perfect tissue and organ match for all 5 patients. Okay, so this one is a little bit more gruesome, but is it really? If you said you would push the person over the overpass in dilemma 2, then what's the real difference here? Let's set aside for the moment any legalities. Let's say you could get away with it. Would it be ethically justifiable to sacrifice this one person in order to save the other 5? If you aren't someone totally lacking in empathy, your brain, like the majority of survey respondents on this question, is most likely going, no, it would totally be wrong.
I would not sacrifice the person. I would not, simply. Like, I knew right away I could not, so.
Yeah, so again, absolutely not my decision to me. You know, it's funny, I'm not Mr. Religious per se, even though it's brought on me a little bit. And thou shalt not kill, you know, you never hear these words anymore.
But do you literally have any other reason to conclude that, other than the fact that your brain is literally programmed to negatively respond to this situation? Well, let's get to the bottom of it. The philosopher Elizabeth Anscombe came up with a principle called the Doctrine of Double Effect to deal with situations like this. And arguably it goes back even further than that to the medieval period with the philosopher Thomas Aquinas' views on permissible killing. The Doctrine of Double Effect states that as long as you take an action without having the intention to create the bad effect, then your action is generally permissible. So applying this to dilemma number 1, on this view it would be permissible to flip the switch because you did not intend the outcome, which was killing the one person. Instead, your intention was to save the 5. So then it seems it would solve dilemmas 2 and 3, right? Because in those two situations, you clearly do intend to push the person over the overpass and also intend to harvest the person's organs. But there have been numerous criticisms of this principle. Stephen Nathanson classically pointed out in Terrorism and the Ethics of War that on this principle, you could strike a military target with the intention of killing the enemy, but end up killing many civilians either instead of the enemy or as collateral damage, but still claim you acted morally because you simply didn't intend that to happen. So he came up with a principle that I've termed in my own book on this subject the contrary double effect principle, stating that in order for an action to be ethical, you must not only not intend the bad consequences of your actions to happen, but also intend not those bad consequences. In other words, actively do everything in your power to stop civilian casualties from happening. So then what would this look like in our 3 dilemmas? In dilemma number 1, you could argue that your sole effort and intention is to save the 5 people while working as hard as you can to avoid the death of the one person. And then the same moral principle would clearly prohibit us from pushing the man over the overpass in dilemma 2 and killing the man in dilemma 3. But does this really hold up in dilemma 1? Well, here's the thing. In a more realistic situation, we might be able to justify our actions to flip the switch away from the 5 people by saying that right afterwards we would yell to the one person to get off the tracks or try to stop the train or something. But in the dilemma that we just presented as it is, with the only 2 choices that we can make, can we really say that we intended not to kill that one person? Okay, so these are all just unrealistic thought experiments that have no application to the real world, right? Well, especially with the rapid growth of new technologies and AI, no, they're actually not. Let's take the case of autonomous or self-driving cars, for example. Tesla and other companies have already begun major developments in this area, and it seems like only a matter of time before it'll be common to see lots of self-driving cars on the road. The problem with them is in how they're programmed to avoid accidents. A group of researchers at MIT have shed light on this problem in recent years with a project called the Moral Machine. On this free platform, you can test your moral decision making against that of other users on the platform with respect to what kinds of decisions you would make when given car accident scenarios in which you have to choose between running over different combinations of groups or individuals. In these situations, most of us act instinctively or intuitively. We literally only could have just about a split second to decide who to save and who to kill. However, self-driving cars must be pre-programmed with these decisions in mind, meaning that the designers of these vehicles might be deciding in advance whose life is more valuable and whose life is not. And they literally have the power over life and death. Are old people less valuable than young people? Are criminals' lives less valuable than those of doctors? How about a man versus a pregnant woman? While you probably couldn't blame these people's deaths on the split-second decisions of drivers under normal circumstances, could we consider the programmers of automated vehicles and AI technology morally responsible because they had time to actually decide beforehand who to kill and who to let live? What principles are they using to make those decisions? And should that kind of decision-making power belong to any one person or company? If you want to take a deeper dive into these questions and how these decisions may be affecting your everyday life, then be sure to watch this next video.